Alrighty, in this lesson we're going to go ahead and get this slider portion working and turn this into a horizontal scrub-based slider. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and call a new function called slider section. So let's put that in here, and then in our slider section we'll just put this right after the render, or before the render loop. Alright, so for our function, we're going to go ahead and specify function slider section. All right, so this is going to be a little bit more of a complex, section to deal with because there's a decent amount of code, but it's not too bad. So for this slider, I do know I only want this slider to occur on desktop. So that means we're going to use match media as part of GSAP to make this following code only apply to desktop. So in order to do that, let mm equals gsap.matchMedia. All right, and then we're going to add essentially a media query of min width 768. And then we open it up. Oopsie, I'm really screwing this up here. There we go. We're going to open this up, and now what we're going to do is we're going to get access to two variables where we get access to the overall slider container and the individual slides themselves. And that code looks like this. So let slider equals document query selector slider, and then let slider sections gsap utils to array slide, and there happens to be 3 of them in our HTML. So here is the slider, and then here's the 3 slide elements that it's going to gain access to. Now what we're going to do is create a slider timeline. So slider TL equals gsap.timeline, and defaults is going to be ease none because it's going to be a scrub based slider, so we put that to none. Scroll trigger is going to be the slider itself for the trigger. Pin will be true because we're going to pin the section once we reach to the slider. So we keep it in view so we don't scroll past it vertically because it's horizontal. And then we're going to put scrub 1. You could put scrub true, but scrub 1 or 2 or 3 will just will affect the timing of your scroll. And then also, if you recall this little bit of code when we were doing this earlier in the course, this is adjusting when the slider stops, and this is the code that we use for that, slider.offsetWidth. Okay, looks good to me, and we're good at there. So now once we have the slider timeline defined, we're going to call it slider TL to, oh wait, let's get rid of that. There we go. To slider, we take our slider, and this slider timeline is just all for handling defining the slider as horizontal itself, and then we'll create some other animations for the text inside of it to animate. So X%, we're going to put -66 here, and then we make this. Let me just make sure I'm doing this correctly. Yeah, let's get rid of that, and then right here, we're going to specify this, the greater than, to make sure that it starts at the beginning. We're going to put 2 progress. So if you recall, there is going to be a white progress bar. The width by default has been set to 0. So we're going to change that here to 100%. And that's basically just a white line. And it's just for our progress, essentially. After that, we're also going to go ahead and specify our slider sections. So slider sections dot for each. All right, and I'll talk about that in 1 second here to show you what that is. If you forget, we're going to pass in the stop and an index, and right here. So slider sections, if you recall, is just gaining access to all those 3 slides, and so we want to iterate through each one of those, or loop over them. And when we do that, we want to create split type for that information, like this right here. We want to make this split type so we can make each individual character animate. So that looks like const slide text equals new split type with the stop right here. This means the current slides query selector, and then we can gain access to the slide-p class, which is attached onto each one of those, slide-p. All right, and we use types chars as well. After that, we then use slider timeline, and we're going to say from slide text.chars, opacity 0, y10, a stagger between each of them of just a 0.03. And then we're going to define a scroll trigger on this as well, while also utilizing a container animation. So this is what that looks like. So it's a scroll trigger. The trigger itself is the current slide or the paragraph inside of the text. Start is top, bottom, center. Container animation, if you recall that, we had a whole section on this where we pass in the slider timeline and scrub true. All right, so let's save this and see if it actually works. So we're gonna scroll down here and, all right, there we go. Look at that. So this is our progress bar. And it's just like a real kind of like a trendy little thing. But yeah, that's it. Okay, great. So now that we have this part done, and by the way, if we come out here, you can just see that these will stack on top of each other without any animation. Now, if you wanted to add like some like text reveal animation, or you doing the same thing we were doing before, you would go ahead over here and you would modify this right here. So there's a couple ways. Remember the conditional way of doing it, or you could just do an else statement as well. But if you want to have less verbose codes, you can do it the conditional way by adjusting some of these parameters. I decided just to make the mobile version super simple. Okay, so that is it for that section. The next section is actually going to be the contact section, and we should be very close to wrapping up.